Let me share something with you, a piece of advice that changed everything. Not from a book, not from a course, from a millionaire who said something so simple that most people hear it and move on. He said, "Don't worry about making millions. Focus on your first 100,000. Because after that, your wealth doesn't just grow, it explodes." I didn't fully understand it at the time, but I did what he said. And what happened next is exactly what we are going to talk about today. Not theory, not motivation, the actual mathematics behind why ordinary people who make one specific decision early enough end up with extraordinary wealth, and why most people who never understood this mechanism work their entire lives and arrive at the end with far less than they deserved. This is the bigger picture. Let me start with a question that most people have never stopped to answer honestly. Why is it so hard to build the first $100,000? Not because people aren't working hard enough, not because they aren't saving, not because they lack discipline or intelligence or the genuine desire to build something real. It is hard for a specific mathematical reason, one that nobody explains clearly and that most people never fully understand. Here is the reason. At the beginning of your wealth-building journey, compound interest is almost invisible, and the numbers are too small for it to do anything meaningful. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Say you invest $10,000 in a broad market index fund with a historical average annual return of 7%. After 5 years, your $10,000 becomes $14,176. 5 years of patience, 5 years of discipline, 5 years of leaving that money untouched. For $4,176 in returns, that is approximately $800 per year, less than $70 per month. Now here is what that feels like from the inside. You are working hard, you are saving consistently, you are doing everything right, and the returns feel almost irrelevant, barely noticeable against the cost of living, barely significant against the sacrifices you are making to keep investing. And this is exactly the moment when most people lose faith, not because the strategy is wrong, because the strategy has not yet reached the threshold where it starts to work visibly. That threshold is approximately $100,000, and here is what changes when you cross it. The same 7% annual return applied to $100,000 generates $7,000 per year, not $14,000 over 5 years. $7,000 in a single year, $583 per month, generated not by your labor, not by your time, not by any additional effort on your part, simply by the money that is already there, doing what money at scale does, compounding. And here is where the mathematics becomes genuinely extraordinary. Going from $0 to $100,000, investing $10,000 per year at 7%, takes approximately 7 years and 10 months. Going from $100,000 to $200,000 takes only 5 years and 1 month, 2 years and 9 months faster, 35% faster to accumulate the same amount. Going from $200,000 to $300,000 takes 3 years and 9 months, from $300,000 to $400,000, 3 years. From $400,000 to $500,000, 2 years and 6 months. Do you see what is happening? Each additional $100,000 arrives faster than the one before. Not because you are earning more, not because the market is performing better, because the base that is compounding is larger. And a larger base at the same rate produces larger returns every single year. This is the snowball effect. And it is one of the most powerful, most misunderstood, most underutilized forces in personal finance. Your money is a snowball rolling down a hill. In the beginning, the hill is steep, the snowball is small, and progress feels slow. But as the snowball grows, it collects more snow with every rotation, not because the hill got steeper, because the snowball got bigger, and a bigger snowball collects more snow, which makes it bigger still, which means it collects even more snow, in a cycle that accelerates with every passing year. The people who become genuinely wealthy almost always describe the same experience. For years, It felt like nothing was happening. The numbers moved, but slowly. The progress was real, but invisible against the scale of what they were working toward. And then, somewhere around that first 100,000, something shifted. The return started to feel significant. The compounding started to be visible. The snowball started to feel heavy. That moment is not luck. It is not timing. It is the inevitable mathematical outcome of staying in long enough for the mechanism to reach the scale where it becomes undeniable. And in the next part of this conversation, we are going to talk about exactly how to get there. So how do you get to $100,000? Not in theory, not with a perfect income and zero obligations and ideal circumstances, in a real life, with real expenses, with the mortgage and the kids and the job that pays what it pays and the months that go wrong and the unexpected costs that always seem to arrive at exactly the wrong time. How do you actually get there? The honest answer is that it requires two things working simultaneously. The first is margin. Not a large margin, not a dramatic restructuring of your entire financial life. Margin. The gap between what you earn and what you spend. However small that gap is, it is the raw material of everything else. Because without margin, there is nothing to invest. And without investment, the snowball never starts rolling. Most people, when they think about building wealth, think about the investment side first. Which fund, which platform, which strategy. But the investment side is only half the equation. The other half, the half that most financial content glosses over, is the gap, creating it, protecting it, widening it deliberately over time. Not through deprivation, not through the kind of extreme frugality that makes financial life feel like punishment, through intentionality, the deliberate decision, made once and revisited regularly, about what your money is actually for. A simple framework that many investors find useful is this: 70% of income toward living expenses, 20% toward investments and wealth building, 10% toward genuine enjoyment of your life. Not because those numbers are magic, but because they represent a structure that keeps investing happening without making financial life feel like sacrifice. And here is the part that most people miss about this framework. The 20% toward investments should be automated, not decided monthly, not dependent on what is left after everything else. Automated, transferred before you see it, gone before the spending decisions begin. Because here is what happens when investing is a decision: it competes with every other decision. The weekend that costs more than expected, the repair that arrives without warning, the month where everything seems to need attention at once. And investing, which produces no immediate visible benefit, loses that competition more often than it wins. Automation removes the competition entirely. The investment happens before the decisions, before the temptations, before the month has a chance to consume what was supposed to be building your future. The second thing required to reach 100,000 is time. And this is where most people make the most expensive mistake available. They wait, not because they are irresponsible, because they are waiting for the right conditions. The debt to be cleared first, the emergency fund to be complete first, the income to be higher first, the market to be less uncertain first. There is always a reason to wait, and every reason, however valid it feels in the moment, costs something specific and calculable. Let me give you the number. A monthly investment of $300, started at age 35, at a historical average return of 8% annually, produces approximately $350,000 by age 65. The same $300 per month, started at age 40, produces approximately $230,000 by the same age, and a difference of $120,000 from 5 years of waiting. Not from making a bad investment, not from choosing the wrong fund, from waiting 5 years for conditions that felt more right than the conditions that already existed. This is why getting to 100,000 is not primarily a strategy problem. It is a timing problem. Start earlier than feels necessary, invest less than feels meaningful, and let time do what time does, because the snowball does not care how it starts. It only cares how long it rolls. And the longer it rolls, the less the starting size matters, and the more inevitable the destination becomes. I want to talk about something that most financial content carefully avoids because it is uncomfortable, and because the people who profit from your not knowing it would prefer you never stop to think about it clearly. Compound interest is one of the most powerful forces in personal finance. We have established that. But here is what almost nobody tells you. It works in both directions. The same mathematical force that builds extraordinary wealth over time, when applied to debt instead of investment, destroys it with equal efficiency. Let me show you exactly what I mean. The average American household carries approximately $6,000 in credit card debt at an average interest rate of 20.4%. 20.4%, compounding every single month, on a balance that minimum payments barely reduce. Here is what that actually costs. A $6,000 balance at 20.4% interest with minimum payments only takes approximately 17 years to pay off. 17 years. And costs nearly $6,000 in interest alone. You pay for the original debt twice. But here is the part that makes this genuinely devastating. While that debt is compounding against you, the money you are spending on interest is not going into your snowball, it is melting it. Think about the snowball rolling down the hill. Compound interest on your investments is the snow it collects. Every dollar of snow added makes the snowball bigger, which collects more snow, which makes it bigger still. Now imagine the sun beating down on that hill. That sun is debt interest. Every dollar consumed by debt payments is a dollar that is not collecting snow, not building the base, not contributing to the compounding that accelerates after 100,000. It is actively working against the mechanism, and here is what makes it most dangerous. The amounts feel small. The minimum payment on $6,000 of credit card debt is approximately $150 per month. $150. That feels manageable, almost insignificant against the scale of a monthly budget, but $150 per month, invested consistently for 30 years at 7%, becomes over $180,000. That is not a small number. That is the difference between retiring with options and retiring without them. Transferred, month by month, minimum payment by minimum payment, to a credit card company, by someone who was being responsible, who never missed a payment, who did everything they were told. This is why addressing high-interest debt is not just a financial priority, it is a prerequisite. Not because debt is morally wrong, not because borrowing is always a mistake, but because compound interest working against you makes compound interest working for you almost impossible to feel. The snowball cannot grow when the sun is melting it faster than it can collect snow. And here is the practical sequence that changes this. First, list every debt you carry, not approximately, precisely. The balance, the interest rate, the minimum payment, every single one. Then, rank them by interest rate, highest first. That highest rate debt is the sun beating down on your snowball. Every extra dollar you can direct toward it is reducing the heat, slowing the melt, giving your snowball a chance to survive long enough to reach the shade. And the shade is the financial position where debt is managed, margin exists, and the snowball can finally start rolling without the sun working against it. That position is closer than most people believe. Not because the debt disappears overnight, but because understanding the mechanism changes how urgently you treat it, and urgency, applied consistently, is the most effective tool available for reaching the threshold where compound interest stops being your enemy and starts being the most reliable wealth-building force you will ever have access to. Let's talk about acceleration, because everything we have discussed so far, the snowball, the compounding, the threshold of 100,000, assumes a single income stream directed toward a single goal. And for most people, that assumption produces a timeline that feels discouraging. 7 years and 10 months to reach 100,000, investing 10,000 per year. That is a long time. And the honest question that most people ask at this point is whether there is a way to get there faster. The answer is yes, not through shortcuts, not through speculative investments that promise extraordinary returns in exchange for extraordinary risk. Through a principle that is simple, unsexy, and extraordinarily effective. Multiple streams directed toward the same goal. Let me explain what I mean practically. Most people approach wealth building from one direction: reduce expenses, find margin in the existing budget. Direct that margin toward investments. And expense reduction matters. It is real, it is necessary, it is the foundation of everything else. But there is a ceiling to how much you can cut. There is no ceiling to how much you can earn. And the person who attacks the timeline from both directions simultaneously, reducing expenses on one side and growing income on the other, moves at a fundamentally different speed. Not because they found a secret, because they doubled the force working toward the same destination. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not talking about working yourself into exhaustion. I am not talking about sacrificing every hour of your life in pursuit of a number. I'm talking about something more specific than that. The deliberate development of a skill, a service, a capability that generates income beyond your primary salary. Not necessarily a large amount, not immediately, but consistently and growing. Because here is what an additional $500 per month directed entirely toward your first 100,000 does to that 7-year and 10-month timeline. It cuts it to approximately 5 years and 3 months, 2.5 years faster. From a single additional income stream of $500 per month, not 5,000, not 10,000, 500. The mathematics of acceleration are not complicated. Every additional dollar directed toward the threshold shortens the time before compounding becomes visible, and every month that compounding is visible earlier compounds on itself for longer. The person who reaches 100,000 2 years earlier does not just get there 2 years faster, they get 2 additional years of the accelerated compounding that happens after the threshold, 2 more years of the snowball rolling at full speed, 2 more years of $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 in annual returns, generated without additional effort. The gap between that outcome and the original timeline, measured over 30 years, is not months, it is hundreds of thousands of dollars. From 2 years of faster accumulation at the beginning. This is why the early phase, the phase before the snowball reaches full momentum, deserves more energy and more intentionality than any other phase of wealth building. Not because it is the most exciting phase, it is the least exciting phase. The returns are small, the progress feels slow, the sacrifices feel disproportionate to the results. But the decisions made in this phase determine everything that follows. The person who reaches 100,000 at 40 and the person who reaches it at 45 are not 5 years apart. They are a lifetime of compounding apart, and that lifetime starts with the decision made today, not tomorrow, not when the conditions are better, not when the income is higher or the debt is cleared or the timing finally feels right. Today, with whatever is available. Directed with complete intention toward the threshold, that changes everything on the other side. Let me tell you what the other side actually feels like, not the number on the statement, the experience. Because most financial content stops at the strategy. Here is what to invest, here is how much, here is the timeline, and almost nobody talks about what it actually feels like. When the mechanism shifts, when the snowball finally reaches the size where it starts collecting snow faster than you can add it manually, when compound interest stops being a concept and starts being a number on your statement that genuinely surprises you. Let me be specific. You invested $10,000 per year for approximately 8 years. You contributed approximately $80,000 of your own money, and your account shows $100,000. The compounding contributed $20,000. That feels modest, almost disappointing against 8 years of discipline. But now something changes. In the 9th year, at 7%. Your $100,000 generates $7,000 without a single additional contribution, $7,000 from money that is already there. In the 10th year, assuming you kept contributing and the balance grew, the compounding contribution starts to approach and then exceed your annual contribution. The money is making more money than you are adding. That moment is the moment everything changes emotionally, not just mathematically, emotionally. Because for years, the discipline felt like the point, the contribution, the sacrifice, the choice to invest instead of spend. That was the work, and now the work is still happening. But something else is happening alongside it. Something that requires nothing from you. No hours, no decisions, no effort, just time. And that experience of watching a number grow because of something you set in motion years ago changes how you relate to money permanently. It stops feeling like something you chase. It starts feeling like something that works. And that shift from chasing to building is the psychological transformation that most financial content never talks about, because it cannot be rushed, it cannot be simulated, it can only be experienced by someone who stayed long enough to reach the threshold where the mechanism becomes undeniable. Now let me give you the numbers that make the long game concrete. If you invest $250 per month, starting at age 35, at a historical average return of 7% annually, by age 65, you will have approximately $340,000. Of that $340,000, you contributed $90,000 of your own money. $250,000 came from compound interest, not from your labor, not from your time, from the mechanism, from the snowball collecting snow for 30 years. Now here is what makes that number even more significant. Most people, when they hear $250 per month, think that is too small to matter. They are waiting until they can invest $500 or $1,000, or until the debt is cleared and the conditions are better. And while they wait, the $250 that could have been rolling sits still, and the compound interest that could have been building never starts. The amount is not the variable that matters most, the time is. $250 started today outperforms $500 started 5 years from now. Not because 250 is more than 500, because time in the market is the resource that cannot be replaced once it is gone. And every year of delay is a year of compounding that no future contribution can fully recover. This is the truth about compound interest that changes behavior, not the charts, not the projections, not the theoretical million-dollar outcome at retirement. The understanding that the mechanism is running right now, for the people who started, and not running, for the people who are waiting. Which side of that equation you are on is entirely within your control. If you are still here, I want to stop for just a moment, because what we have been building together in this conversation is something most people spend decades trying to piece together on their own, not from a course, not from a financial advisor with products to sell, from an honest look at the mathematics, the snowball, the threshold, the moment when compound interest stops being a concept and starts being a force you can actually feel. We talked about why the first 100,000 is the hardest, not because the strategy is wrong, because the scale is too small for the mechanism to feel real yet. We talked about debt as the sun melting the snowball, and why addressing it urgently is not just a financial priority, it is the prerequisite for everything else. We talked about acceleration, how a single additional income stream, directed with complete intention toward the threshold, can cut years from the timeline, and how those years recovered at the beginning compound into a lifetime of difference at the end. And we talked about what the other side actually feels like the moment the mechanism shifts, when the money starts making more money than you are adding, when the discipline that felt like the point becomes the foundation of something that works on its own. That knowledge is yours now, not theoretical, not abstract, real, specific, applicable to wherever you are right now. with whatever you have, starting whenever you decide. And if this conversation has shifted something, if something here has landed differently than the financial content you usually encounter, I want to invite you to stay close to this channel. Subscribe, so the next conversation reaches you when it is ready. Not for tips, not for shortcuts, not for the excitement of someone telling you which investment is hot right now, for the bigger picture. The kind of understanding that compounds the way good investments do, slowly at first, then faster. Until one day, the financial world that once felt confusing and intimidating and somehow always designed for someone else becomes something you navigate with quiet confidence. That shift is available to you, and it starts with staying close to conversations like this one. Subscribe. Share this with someone in your life who is stuck at the beginning, who is contributing every month and feeling like nothing is happening, who needs to hear that the mechanism is working, even when it is invisible, even when the returns feel too small to matter, even when the patience required feels disproportionate to the progress visible. The snowball is rolling. It just has not reached the hill yet. This conversation might be exactly what keeps them going. And now, let's finish what we started, because everything we have discussed today points toward a single truth, a truth that is simple enough to state in one sentence and deep enough to take a lifetime to fully live. Compound interest does not reward intelligence. It does not reward income. It does not reward the person who found the best strategy or picked the best fund or timed the market correctly. It rewards one thing and one thing only: patience. The specific, unglamorous, deeply unsexy patience of someone who started, stayed, and let the mechanism do what the mechanism does, not for months, for years, for decades. For long enough that the snowball they started rolling became something they could no longer stop even if they tried. That is the wealth that compound interest creates, not quickly, not dramatically, but inevitably, for anyone willing to give it enough time. And the question that closes this conversation is the same question that opens every real financial journey. How much time are you willing to give it? I want to end with something honest, not inspiring, not motivational, not the kind of conclusion that produces a feeling in the moment and evaporates by morning. Something honest. Most people will never become millionaires, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack discipline, not because the system is rigged against them or the odds are insurmountable or the starting point is too far from the destination. Because they never understood the mechanism. They worked hard, saved occasionally, spent most of what they earned, and arrived at the end of their working lives wondering why the distance between where they are and where they thought they would be never quite closed. The answer was never in the amount. It was always in the time, and the time, for most of them, passed while they were waiting for better conditions. I want you to hear something clearly. You do not need to be wealthy to start building wealth. You do not need a high income. You do not need a perfect credit score. You do not need to have your entire financial life sorted before the first investment makes sense. You need margin, however small. You need consistency, however modest. And you need time, however much you have left. Those three things, combined with the mechanism we discussed today, are sufficient, not to guarantee a specific outcome. Nothing in investing guarantees outcomes, but to put you on the right side of the mathematics, the side where time is working for you instead of against you, the side where every year that passes adds to the snowball instead of shrinking it, the side where the distance between where you are and where you want to be is actually closing. Let me leave you with the number that makes this real: $100 per month, not $250, not $500, $100 per month. Invested consistently in a broad market index fund at a historical average return of 7% annually for 30 years becomes approximately $120,000. Of that $120,000, you contributed $36,000 of your own money. $84,000 came from compound interest, from the mechanism, from the snowball you started rolling. With $100 per month, that is not a large amount, That is less than the cost of a daily coffee, less than most people spend on subscriptions they barely use, less than what most people would describe as a meaningful investment. And yet, over 30 years, it builds something real, something that changes options, something that changes how a retirement feels, something that could not have existed without the decision to start. That decision does not require perfect conditions. It does not require a specific income or a specific age or a specific level of financial sophistication. It requires only the understanding that the mechanism exists, that it is available to you, and that every day you give it is a day it cannot give back. You have that understanding now. The snowball is at the top of the hill. The only question left is whether you push it. If this conversation has been worth your time, share it with 5 people who are waiting for the right moment to start, who deserve to understand that the right moment was always now. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you want to understand next. What part of your financial life still feels like a locked room? What question you have been carrying without knowing where to take it? Ask it here. Because the next conversation starts with what you need most. This is the bigger picture: money, wealth, and the life you're building. We'll see you in the next one.